So part of the reason I'm involved is that research is critical here. I mean, it is, that's how we're going to make a difference to treatment. That's how we're going to make a difference to outcomes. And so I thought it was important to tell you a little bit about the process, so that you don't think all the money disappears, doesn't actually make a difference, and tell you a little bit about what we've actually funded so far. So how we fund research. So this is kind of the process. We'll come back to that in a minute. A bit about what we've funded. A little bit about going forward, what we're going to do. Okay, and then I'll take any questions. So of course it starts with you and all the fundraisers. And as I was driving here this morning, I suddenly realised I'd forgotten. There are so many people who've done fantastic things for BCRT, and looking at Fiona's run the London Marathon, which is extraordinary. As has Dirty Dog Jays. I don't know if he's here yet, but you'll meet Lee later. And so all of you have done extraordinary things for funding bone cancer research. And so far I've raised 1.7 million, of which a bit over £1 million has been put into research so far, or committed to it. So extraordinary, really. So the process, traditionally we've had 2 grant calls a year, okay, and these have been, bar one, I think, have been open calls. So basically we say to researchers generally, would you like to apply for a grant from the Bone Cancer Research Trust? And we think that's important, because in a way that allows people to suggest what their best ideas are. But it obviously it means that we end up with a whole lot of different things, some apples and some oranges that we have to sift through, because ultimately we want to use that money, and this is one of the big challenges. We want to make the biggest impact possible with that money. And in general, what we've always tried to do is fund pilot schemes that would then allow researchers to attract funding from bigger agencies like Cancer Research UK. So that's been the general kind of strategy. So we have an application process, and people kind of queue up and put in their applications. It then goes out to peer review. These are the only 2 I had photographs of. Sue's sitting at the back, you're very smaller. The bigger Sue is at the back. That's Joseph Moore, is a paediatric oncologist. So we get these applications and we send them out to people we think understand the science, and we think can make an informed judgment about whether or not these studies should be funded. And we rely a lot on people like this to contribute to this process for nothing. Okay, so this is a voluntary process. So we ask the best researchers to score applications, and then we get them back. And then we sit in a research committee. Looks a bit like Conservative Party. Anyway, so there's David Cameron. David Cameron, Andrew Lansley, Nick Clegg, and I, the beardy bloke. I know, you meet Harriet. Harriet's a recent appointment. Harriet is a scientist, and we're delighted to have her on board. She's sitting in a blue T-shirt. So she brings her own connections, her own networks, and is really helping us make sure this process is as efficient as it could be. So the research committee then reviews everything and goes pretty much by the scores, but we want to make sure that that due process is followed and so on. So we'll go through them and we'll say, these, we'll kind of define where the bar goes for the latest set of applications. And we get a reasonable number of applications. We get at least twice as many applications as we funded, probably more than that, maybe 3 times. And then we've got a bunch of wise owls, okay, the trustees. So we then go back to the trustees, although I am a trustee, we then go back to the trustees and say, look, this is what we'd like to fund. How much money is in the bank? How are we going to budget for this over the coming years? Because part of the challenge is organising, although you've got that money, is organising how it's going to be spent to make sure that everyone gets their research projects finished. And then the researchers, desperate for a bit of money, get awarded the grant. So this is really, this is a really important process, because for rare things like bone cancer, there just hasn't been funding to do this. And I'm pleased to say that BCRT has definitely had an impact in this arena. Okay, so what has been funded? 27 research projects since 2006, and there's just a couple of headlines that kind of sprung to mind. The Connective Tissue Oncology Society is a very big meeting of European and North American, primarily, people who are interested in sarcoma. And the meeting last year in Chicago, Sarah Welsh from London was awarded a Young Investigator Award, and she was able to stand up and say, look, I was funded by Bone Cancer Research Trust. That's very important. This is making a difference. We've had a paper in Nature Genetics. That's one of the biggest impact journals in medical science. That's one of the, that's this year by Adrian Flanagan from London. This was her paper, and it says, at the end of it, it says, thanks to Bone Cancer Research Trust. Yeah. And so, sorry, it's a bit out of focus, and this map is a bit out of date, but we've basically been lighting fires, over the UK, trying to stimulate people, sucking in researchers, saying, look, this is an interesting area. We want the best ideas, so we want people to use our networks of researchers, bring the best ideas to bone cancer, because we think that's what's going to make the difference. So what sort of things? There's a poster outside, actually, and Harriet will take you through it, but there's a bunch of things that have been funded, and we'll talk a little bit. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, right? So it doesn't say hammer or drill. I don't necessarily get it, but look, here's this is an interesting study. This is an interesting study because this looks at a new class of drugs. Okay, and this is a class of drugs that might be particularly useful in Ewing sarcoma. So essentially, what I'm showing you here is that two basic science projects or basic science research projects have been done around this new drug, which is available for other cancers. And very shortly, we're hoping that this is going to go into a clinical trial. So this is a pre-existing drug used in other cancers. We've used money to demonstrate that, or to fund pilot projects that allow scientists to demonstrate that it could work in Ewing sarcoma, which is a prerequisite to doing a clinical study. And that we're very much hoping this is going to go into a clinical trial. So this, it would have been much harder to get this to happen without BCRT funding. We've got some other, just to show you that this particular study, again from London, has generated follow-on funding. Okay, so we've started it off, someone else has taken that pilot data, gone and got more funding. So we're turning researchers onto the idea of researching in bone cancer, and they're able to generate more revenue. It's very important, and being presented at important meetings. Yeah. So spreading, if we fund research, we want the findings to be out there, and disseminating them in clinical meetings is very important. Okay, so here's a study that's allowed the researchers to set up a collaboration with scientists in France. Okay, so again, we've got a network. We've got to allow scientists to share the data, to talk to each other, if we're going to make a difference. Okay. What else have we got? Another one. This is CRUK Development Committee funding has been awarded for this study. So this is another one, and this study's been published in Sarcoma and Oncogene. Okay, so these are, again, just important things. So we are making a difference. Okay, so what else have we done? BCRT is making a big difference in this field, in the local treatment of Ewing sarcoma. So there was some alarm in this country, let's say about 5 or 6 years ago, in that it seemed that in a major European study, it seemed that the German part of that study appeared to have better results than we'd had in the UK. And that was down to, we thought, differences in local treatment. So how much surgery and how much radiotherapy was being used. This is a really sticky issue because Ewing sarcomas, as you've seen from what Jill said, can occur just about anywhere. And so, as a surgeon, you're looking at the anatomical location of a tumor, and you're always trying to weigh up, well, what's it going to cost that person if we do a big operation to take it out, or should they have radiotherapy, which traditionally we've thought has been pretty good treatment. So in order to try and bottom out some of these, there was a Ewing's Local Therapy Conference where we had teams from all over Europe and from the States sat down and voted on how, we showed, or Lee Jays will be here later, showed slides of cases and got people to vote on how they would actually treat them. That conference was funded by BCRT. This has led to a national Ewing's multidisciplinary conference, which means that we now discuss nationally every case of Ewing sarcoma. So whereas before they were discussed in single center multidisciplinary teams, they're now all discussed on video conferencing, which has been a fascinating exercise. So based on BCRT funding initially catalyzing this, we're now able to try and tease out some of the ways in which we're making decisions. So, if you talk about pelvic Ewing sarcoma, just how much disability that you give how much disability is acceptable in a particular situation, for example, or is a patient with a big pelvic tumor better off having just radiotherapy? What do people feel about it? So we've managed to bottom out some of the uncertainties in that process, if you like. But starting the dialogue and starting the conversation has been very much something that BCRT has been responsible for. And we're hoping to have another one of these, probably early next year, when we've got data from the latest European study to discuss. So BCRT has done extraordinary has made an extraordinary difference in this already, in the clinical management of it. We had an early diagnosis call, so one of our theme calls last year was for ideas to improve the time to diagnosis. We didn't feel, following peer review, that the studies were of high enough quality, or certainly the peer reviewers didn't. So we didn't fund a study at the moment, but subsequent to our grant call, there's been a meeting in London where we sat down with people with other clinical interests. So it turns out in the UK we're not very good at diagnosing cancers early, but like sarcomas, like brain tumours, and we're not very good at picking up diabetes early, or asthma particularly early, compared to other countries. Ian's nodding, and because that's very much what he's been involved with recently. So we're contributing to this process, okay, because we think this is important, and we're trying to do it the best way we can. Tumour banking, we asked a bunch of scientists what do you really need to do research in sarcoma, and they all said, well, we need bits of tumours, right, to make a difference. So we had a meeting about tumour banking. This is patchy across the country. Some centres are banking tumours regularly, some centres aren't. And so we've had a meeting, we've come up with a strategy, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to intervene in this area to try and encourage, to make sure that everybody's tumours are banked and available for research. And one of the really important drivers to this is that the patient and family community have all told us very strongly that that's what they want. If someone's tumour is not used for research, then it's a missed opportunity. And not only that, but that people feel strongly that that tumour should be available for the best research wherever it is. So BCRT bringing that focus, actually standing up in front of the scientists, that's happened at our tumour banking meeting, saying, you know, first off, what Sarah said, you know, a bit of tumour has been banked, and that gives me some reassurance that, you know, we're making a contribution to understanding this disease. Or as Andrew said, you know, nobody banked his tumour. It's a disgrace, right? So we're beginning to, you know, we're trying to bring some focus onto this, and there's a little bit of money around, which, so if we can use it strategically, means that we'll be able to catalyse this process also. So what have we kind of done? To try and define what strategy, you know, what the right strategy is, we've been asking the researchers, okay, so I had a meeting in Leeds a couple of years ago, what do you want? What kind of funding do you need to really make this happen? We're asking you, okay, so we've got a bit of work to do this afternoon. We're going to ask you what's the most important thing. So BCRT is about improving outcomes. What does that mean? Right, so there's a lot of things that could mean. So we've got what we want this afternoon is for everyone to chip in to our discussion groups and give us some ideas about what the most important thing is. And we'll talk a bit more about this later. So a bit of work, I'm afraid. And, you know, the general principles of what we want to try and do is develop the infrastructure. You know, we want to make this a fertile environment for the best scientists to come along and say, you know, we've developed something in some other cancer or some other area of work, and we can stand up and say, you know, we're a rare cancer, but here's the fertile ground on which you can, you know, do the research. And some of that will be tumour banking, and some of that a lot of that is about collaboration. So we're very keen on researchers talking to each other. That's where we're going to make the difference. You know, we think that knowledge obviously needs to be shared. The technologies we haven't quite, you know, how you do it is up for debate, but we kind of feel that if we fund, the BCRT funds something, then we kind of like that knowledge and that technology to be available to other researchers. Tumour banking we talked about. Sarcoma UK is the other UK major sarcoma charity. We're a small community in sarcomas, and we've certainly been discussing about collaborating with other charities to make sure that between us we really leverage what small assets we have. And this patient voice is really important. Going forward this year, we've had a call for fellowship. So following discussion with scientists, up to date we've funded fairly small pilot pump priming grants. The scientists told us they wanted a bit more than that. A fellowship would be helpful, so we can now fund somebody for 2 or 3 years to look at one particular project in depth. So we've had a call for that. That's going out to reviewers at the moment. And we've talked about whether, you know, smaller grants might be fast-tracked again in order to keep the stimulation going for the research community. Haven't quite worked out the logistics of that. And there you go. That's that.